There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Figures show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
It's the rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to Climactic. I'm one of your hosts, Mark Spencer, but I won't be your host today. Instead, I'm here with
Bronwyn Gresham.
Bronwyn, thank you so much for joining me on the show. You are one of our new hosts here on Climactic. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I guess I feel really privileged to be one of the co-hosts now on Climactic. Originally, I had this idea many years ago to start a podcast myself. I started recording some episodes, but they stayed in the land of recording device.
We called them in the can.
I'm learning the technical jargon. They stayed in the can for, 6 to 8 months until you came to my rescue. You're like the superhero in podcast land who just came delivering all this good news on, well, we could edit and produce them. So I feel incredibly lucky to be able to release this very first episode.
Bronwyn, I'm blushing. I'm sure people can hear it in my voice as well. It's such a pleasure to have you on. And so, of course, you come from a very different perspective than myself, Rich, and the other hosts. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, yeah. Look, I come from a clinical psychology background, so I've worked as a health professional for around 12 years. And for a large part of that, I've also volunteered with some organisations around climate change and psychology. Psychology for a Safe Climate as one of them. And so I've developed this really keen interest for how to bring different stories to life of the various ways that people find their voice in climate change and figure out what their contribution is, but also giving voice to the very real emotional challenges that climate change brings, and also how we look after ourselves and how we navigate that journey together.
Yeah, so one of the main themes sort of running through your work and your perspective is this emphasis on self-care. So if people aren't familiar with that term yet and what it means, they will become more aware of it and also hopefully take it on board and do look after themselves. It's so great to have you on board, Bronwyn, and we're so excited. Can you tell us about this first episode?
The first person who we're going to be speaking to today is called Carolyn Ingvarson, and she's most well known within our community as someone who started an organisation called the Lighter Footprints. And I first heard her speak actually at a climate action summit. She was speaking on letter writing. And I found her so inspiring that me, like a complete non-letter writer, started writing letters myself. And I just found that process was challenging but so cathartic, and it was really at that time a way for me to channel my frustration at the lack of action into my own words and something that then I could share more publicly as a little bit of a platform. So I've had her in my mind over the years, and I often internally call her voice up to give me the courage to speak up and to speak out about climate change. And so, you know, I wanted to see how she got Lighter Footprints up and running, but also just a little bit about her and her life and who's inspired her. And so we really traverse many subjects in this conversation, from how she started up Lighter Footprints to dipping her own toes in politics. As a psychologist, this is going to sound so cliched, but as with many stories, they begin with our mothers, and this is where Carolyn's story begins too. Hi there, friendly listeners, and welcome to Feeling the Change, a podcast where we explore the intersections between psychology, climate change, and self-care. My name is Bronwyn Gresham, and for this episode, I'll be chatting with Carolyn Ingvarson. Walking into her home, I immediately felt welcomed. Her home has a warmth and a sense of richness, history, family, and music. Carolyn is most known in our community as the founder of an organisation called Lighter Footprints. I heard her give a talk at a climate action summit many years ago on letter writing to newspapers. Her passion and conviction in the power of written communication inspired me, a non-writer, to start writing letters. And it surprised me how satisfying it was to express my thoughts, and an added buzz for the ego when they were published. In this episode, Carolyn shares her journey to becoming an activist, in inverted commas, on climate change, something she was reluctant to take up for many years. And she reflects on some of her challenges, the biggest being contemplating the future, the most unthinkable aspect of climate change. What will our future be like for our grandchildren? And so we begin, as with many stories, this one begins with her mother.
3 words to describe me. What? Certainly mother, which is now morphed to grandmother.
Congratulations.
And activist, in inverted commas, and possibly homemaker.
Now, I have to qualify. What does activist in inverted commas mean?
Well, I think in the course of this discussion, you'll probably find that I am a slightly unwilling activist.
Interesting. Well, that has definitely sparked my curiosity. Let's begin. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
I guess my journey began with my mother, who was in her day a surprising science graduate, and she was a zoologist. So I grew up with a mother who was aware of what was around. I won a prize for a project I did by dissecting an earthworm.
And what is in an earthworm? Goodness.
Oh, the most amazing stuff.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I never recovered from it. And it did, well, I ended up as a biology teacher. So I got my first glimpse of the world because of my mum. I used my mum's microscope and I was able to see things that were mind-blowing. And I used to be out there mucking around with worms and chopping them up, you know.
Oh, the poor earthworms.
I did that again.
Look out, Carolyn's coming.
She got that from her father. So sort of there's a generational thing.
Was her father a biologist as well?
He was an engineer, but he kept some mud from Malaya and gave it to her when he came back to Australia. And she was working at the university, and she put it back into water and discovered a little arthropod which hadn't been ever described before. That was one of the first things I knew, was that my grandfather was also a collector and interested in minute things that you couldn't see.
And also interested in his daughter and encouraging her curiosity
yes.
Yeah, like she did with you.
So yeah, it is true. It is true. It is a generational thing.
Yeah.
My brother is a strong influence on me in that he is a director of a sustainability institute, and he has a really powerful view of the world, which is full of hope. I'm actually the eldest of 5, and I love my siblings probably more than most other families I know. We are a bonded 5. The other influence on me was becoming a biology teacher, beginning to understand the issue about greenhouse gas as a biology teacher, the impact on climate. So I always knew it was there.
And was that taught within your university degree? Was it?
No.
So the greenhouse gas
did zoology and botany, and neither of them even mentioned it.
Wow.
But as a biology teacher, I had to learn a whole swag of stuff under the web of life, which is what I taught in Victoria at the time. Certainly, and there were views even then. No, it's all bullshit. So it was never driving force, and that was right through the 70s and 80s.
So were there times when you might have, in your own curiosity, tried to raise that conversation with people and it might have been shut down? Or
No. At that stage, absolutely not. It was not on the radar.
Right.
For me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that CSIRO was doing work on it in those years. I know my brother. I have a tape that my brother did at the time. My brother, by the way, is called Peter Newman, so some people will know him very well, I should imagine. I have a tape of him looking very young, which is headed up The Greenhouse Effect.
Wow.
And that was in 1976.
But I guess your focus was on your early stage career being a teacher. For me, was becoming a psychologist. You know, that something might have been in the background, but the energy was on profession development and just doing the job.
Absolutely so. And I loved being a biology teacher. It was such a gift to be able to talk about what was around you and open kids' eyes to what they were seeing. It was an absolute gift, and I miss it to this day. So my poor grandkids, I have a microscope in my kitchen.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you've adopted that quality from your mum too.
I have a microscope just like my mum did, a better one than she had. And it sits in there and the kids will say, "What's this, Grandma?" And I'll be able to just say, "Let's have a closer look at that."
Oh, wow.
And it's always amazing, anything that you can expand under kid size.
Top of my Christmas wish list, microscope.
Look at the world as an amazing thing that comes out of biology and trying to understand how all the things link together and you knock one bit out and the whole lot tumbles. So all of that in a way has led to me when I went to see Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, in 2006, having retired and taken up a creative writing course.
Oh, wow.
Which is what I always wanted to do, and I was having a lovely time. And these friends took me to the Al Gore's film, and I thought, oh, God, do I want to go and see this? No, I do not.
What was the reluctance, though? Because that surprises me, given, I guess, how fascinated you were with biology and what do you think that was about?
I thought more political here.
Yeah.
This is going to be something. You know, I knew who Al Gore was.
Yeah.
I was a sort of fan in many ways, but I was not into climate change or activism or anything. And I suppose, now that you mention it, it might have been a fear that I might have to. I didn't want to buy into it. I had a nice life, thank you. Very nice life, because I'd stopped working and I was
you were finally
really
living your dream
doing
of creative
wonderful
writing
stuff. So I watched this film, and afterwards the group of us went and had a cup of coffee together and bumped into another friend of mine who had been there. He said to me, "You're doing a writing course, aren't you? Write me a piece about Al Gore's film and I'll put it in the local news." I said, "Oh, Jesus, Bill, no, I don't want to." He said, "Get a life. Do it. You got right tomorrow night, deadline." This was the first time I'd felt that this was something I didn't want to write about. But when I sat down to do it, I found the words came. And, of course, doing a writing course means that you do tap into something. You are in the mode of trying to express something with meaning and in not too many words and with a bit of passion.
Yeah.
And I said, I was terrified by this film, terrified. And I thought, there must be other people who feel like this out here in our community, and they don't know what to do either. And maybe if you feel like I do and you think that together we might do something that we can't do on our own, call me. And I got 12 phone calls.
Wow.
And those phone calls, I said, "Come and have a drink." And we got together as a group of 12 with a champagne and celebrated the fact that we'd got together. And within 2 hours we formed this group.
And the group is called?
The group is called Lighter Footprints.
It's such a beautiful phrase and name.
And it's had a resonance that relates to that name that we all love. It took a while to get it. We went through Your Green Neighbourhood. And
so hard to come up with names of things, though.
It was amazing that we stumbled upon this by looking for a website name, getting the right. And we found that we could, and we said, yeah, that's it, perfect. So that group, apart from those who've died and moved on, is still there.
Wow.
So we have the original people who turned up are still the group. This is now 13 years.
I think it's important to tell the audience a little bit about your group, because I've only attended one of the meetings, although I always delight in getting the emails and reading who you're inviting to the groups and what kind of discussions are being had at these groups. And I think it was so valuable, even that just one meeting I went to. So tell the audience a little bit about.
Okay. It's grown over time. We initially just met as a small group in my house and talked about what we might do in our own environment, our own homes, our own lightening our own footsteps. What do you do? We then went into the neighbourhood house where we had a little bit more space, and we invited experts to come and chat with us every now and then. And still we worked at our own impact. Then we started to understand that this impact was impinged by a range of bigger issues that were controlled outside by state governments and then by, well, in fact, national and international. So we learned that a lighter footprint was related to a much networked way of living and influence. And so what we did was decided that we'd try and get individual speakers to come on a regular basis. And as we did that, so numbers began to grow and we would go to festivals with stalls and talk about green power as this new exciting thing in those days, 2007 and 8 and 9. Trying to think about how you could influence others to sort of join the bandwagon. And over the years, we just fell into the pattern of finding interesting people to give us another view of what a lighter footprint meant to them and how we might further it. So we've covered, you wouldn't believe the range of topics.
I bet.
It's amazing from permaculture and agricultural impacts of carbon dioxide and the research on it and stuff, right through the business of lobbying and electricity and energy and batteries, which we did last week. And it is individual psychology, it's about personal growth, it's about how to have conversations, and it's the deniers, how do you deal with those? And it's out of that we grew how do you communicate with others, and letters to the newspaper became an issue. So we write a lot of letters to the papers, many papers now, about 4 or 5 different papers that pick up letters from us, and a group of about 50 people who over time throw in a letter here and there and build that base. So monthly meetings is what we have, and we get 50, 60 every month. And the other thing that we did is we said, this is not big enough. We need to go bigger than this. We need to be able to build a place in this community which is recognised. So we would hire the town hall in Hawthorn and in Box Hill and invite high-profile speakers, largely because we're in the electorate of Josh Frydenberg, and we were able to build a good relationship with him, which then meant he always came if we asked him. And as one of the speakers, this was always an important base. So we started filling halls, and we've probably done, there's about 6 that I can think of, quite big.
Packed.
Between,
Packed to the brim.
500 to 600 people will come to these sorts of forums. We now know how to run them pretty well.
Did you feel like you're a natural organiser, or did you have to learn a lot of skills along the way?
I think I'm a pretty natural organiser in the sense that I can see what's possible and then work out what you have to do to get there. But, of course, you have to have good relationships with your group. You can never do anything like that on your own. It's totally dependent on getting a group of, you really need for a big forum at least a dozen people who are working hard. With you on spreading the word, on getting things designed and printed, leafleting, getting on the radio. It's not easy to fill a hall at the best of times. In fact,
well,
our local member says that he doesn't easily fill a hall, but he knows we do.
And especially on the topic of climate change, particularly hard to fill a hall. Can I take you back a little bit, because some of the things that you've spoken about are really interesting around when the group initially formed and over a period of time trying to really enact and embody what a lighter footprint means as an individual, and then you came to a point where you realised that there are limits and that there's this kind of then this tension brought in, I want to have a lighter footprint but I'm restricted somehow. And has that tension shifted or changed over the years, or do you feel like that's still quite a big part of the work?
Well, it is interesting. Most of our work is now political lobbying of various sorts. There's very little work we do on our own footprint because it's kind of like done as much as we can.
Yeah.
It is not true for new members, however, so we have to make sure that we revisit that. So our last one was about batteries and whether you need, what does batteries mean for those of us who are interested in getting the solar power up, and just to finish that about the tension between your own needs and how to refurbish your house and all of that, and the bigger political issues, is that when you do have new people, they often tend to be starting where we started, or they are entirely political and they haven't really addressed their home thing. So we get a bit of dissonance in new members. And how you deal with new members is always tricky. So you do have to think how, and what we do is we always have part of the night where you just mill about, and we always have food and drink in very nice amounts of beautiful food.
It is so important,
So we do that before the meeting, halfway through and at the end. And I'd finished working as biology teacher actually in the mid-80s, where I then worked in the public service for another 20 years. One of those accidental things that happen where you get offered a job, and I worked in the office of the Director General for 2 years as a secondment, at the end of which, instead of going back into the school, I went on into the public service. And I didn't quite realise that I was making a dramatic career change. I just thought I was doing something a little bit different for a short term. And once you've made that shift, it's almost impossible to go back.
Yeah.
So I ended up being a public servant in the state government, a little bit in the federal as well, but the state government, and it taught me a huge amount, much of which I use as part of the work that I do now.
What kinds of things do you think?
I think the interesting thing is that I learned how to work with disparate groups. I was working in what was called Business Victoria in those days and had various name changes over time. I stayed in this one job for 10 years and I worked with the whole range of players who weren't talking to each other, but they were talking to me.
So it was the people component that you really loved.
I loved it.
And the challenge.
I found this is the first time I kind of learned about, well, not the first time, but I did learn increasingly that you get information from a whole wide range of people, and you have to weigh up how much of this do I let other people know. And in the end, it's that kind of balancing act that I find myself doing now. Many different players, many different views, many different levels of hierarchy of who's in control of what. That's probably the trickiest part of being where I am now, but I learned such a lot about that in government, where as a public servant you work for government but with an industry. And you constantly got in the back of your mind, I'm here to kind of protect the minister's back, give him information, give him stuff that'll make things work at a state government level. And John Brumby was my minister. And I worked with an industry that was complex and built a supply chain industry that wasn't there before.
Wow.
And so for me, that was the best, that was the greatest part of being exposed to complexity, is recognising that you can actually make a difference.
Yeah. And do you feel that way now? I guess I'm thinking within the complexity often, and maybe some of the people within your group identify with this also, but there's just that sense of there feels like there's so much to do and it can be hard to know what is having an impact, and that can either lead you to doing everything or having choice paralysis and not doing anything. And what do you feel like makes the biggest impact?
The thing I have discovered over time is that I've got less and less certain about what's the best thing and the right way. So I'm prepared to listen to almost anything that anybody has a view about, just to poke it and see, because I am of the view that certainty is a killer. That's one of the reasons I'm a slightly unwilling activist, because I do sometimes come up against those who would describe themselves as activists without the inverted commas, and I draw back because I have this view that things are more complex than they're making out to be, and I wish that I were able to share their single-mindedness and focus. And in many ways, I absolutely love what they do. I can't do it myself.
Do you feel like as you've gone through this journey, has having uncertainty or not knowing become easier to bear or tolerate?
Yes.
How do you do that?
I think it's because I did start out pretty uncertain, and within a little time, I thought, no, in order to make any progress here, you've got to be absolutely clear what it is you're on about, and you fight really hard, and you just don't get distracted. Nah.
That motto's changed?
Didn't work.
Well, did it not work at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what you do is in the end, what I did is I focused on process.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or bad. I have no idea. But for me, it's about the people and what the people want to do and how to make that work. And we found things people like to do, and they wanted to run stalls at the festivals. So we've done that ever since, and we always find people who love to come along with something and a form in their hand and a letter to sign and an engagement and a big model of a solar power station out there that you can talk about, and the kids come, and that's their contribution. And, it was about, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know what I want to say, but I would like to be involved in the process, in the discussion with people.
What's going through my mind now is you seem to be someone who can go with the flow. Even going all the way back to going to the Al Gore movie, you went with the flow. Writing the letter, you went with the flow. Like, it keeps opening up different doors for you.
This is true. This is true. I think the risk is that you're all over the place. And so I do have to ask myself, so what's this about? What are we trying to do here? And that is where you stand back and focus on the aim of this specific something.
Yeah, so you might notice the tide's going in one way, but before you jump on a boat and move with it, you do actually take a bit of an assessment of, is that the direction I want to go in? It's not like you're going with the flow in a haphazard kind of way. It sounds like you are making some very conscious decisions.
I think it's important not to be bossy. And whilst I've been the one that's been the key both to setting it up and keeping all the meetings going and getting I'm retired. It's my life. It's my focus. That is not everybody else's. There's no one else who has as much time and energy devoted to this group as I do, and therefore I'm in I'm in a potentially very dominant position. And so what I think has been successful has been the fact that I don't really know the answers, and I am delighted that somebody thinks they would like to contribute in a particular way and do something, and I said, do it.
Yep.
Go for it.
You're kind of moral and practical
support. It's a very
support.
low-level structure. We didn't incorporate or anything for 10 years.
Yep.
We just were a group of people that did things. Yeah. And there was no bossy boots so much as, I can do this, what can you do? Let's divide it up.
It's kind of quite an enabling energy about you.
I think it's one of the keys to our longevity is that it's been fun to be around because people have not been required to do anything. Yeah. It's supportive and most of us have the capacity to laugh. It's been amazingly good to get together. And I know when we meet, we have committee meetings in my house. Often my husband says, I've never heard a group that's supposed to be working laugh so much.
We'll have to record one of your sessions. It sounds fabulous. Because, you come across as a quite vibrant individual, and I'm wondering, are you always this vibrant and have you always got this passion, or are there, times when you feel a bit exhausted?
I don't think so. It always, because I'm looking at myself quite differently. I'm always surprised. My family, when I say, well, I'm a bit shy about saying that sort of thing, they say, pardon? So I actually am. I don't naturally. And I admitted to another friend in the movement the other day that I was not a natural networker. That I don't go into a room and I can't work it the way some people do. I just find someone I feel comfortable with and burrow it down and talk to that person, and I'll come out knowing things I didn't know before. I can do that. But I'm not really that kind of wild, outgoing style of person, although my family says I have a strong image of some sort.
Do you consider yourself a natural-born leader?
I am a particular kind of leader.
Yeah.
And I think that's true no matter what I've done. It's just not the right out there one. I did get at one stage I had an opportunity to stand for Parliament, for the Labor Party actually, many years ago. And at that time I was seriously considering it because it was a nice thing to have as a potential. And I was unable to follow through on it because I got into a position where a group of women became quite hostile to me, and I couldn't handle it. So I thought, this is not for me.
When you say you couldn't handle it, what was the difficulty? I
couldn't cope with public criticism from women who were in the same field as me.
Yeah.
I was working in feminist stuff is a bit like that, where there were the true believers and the true rules, and if you didn't follow those, if you worked with men, if you worked in a situation that was a bit more complex, which is what I've always done, to be publicly and privately criticised in the way in which I was demolished me.
Yeah, I guess.
just pulled out.
Yeah.
I pulled out. I said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
It kills me.
I mean, it's tapping into a very wise part of that brain. When we're being attacked, you don't stay in the space of attack. You move away. You move to safety. Whether that's
well,
mental
I think
attack.
a lot of politicians almost thrive on it. They say, I must be doing good because I'm being attacked. I couldn't handle that.
Well, it's something that I think a lot about myself because I've always thought, maybe I could be a politician, but it's that culture that frightens me, and I think it's almost like if you're being attacked, the only way to cope is, if you stay in the situation, is to attack back, and then you get those debates that you witness in Parliament happening around each side attacking each other. And I think when that's not your nature or leadership style, it's really off-putting. And just from the conversation that we've had today, your leadership style around listening to others and being open to diversity and diverse opinions, and then trying to be guided in what you do through other people. You're someone who's kind of more blending and interested in other people as opposed to critiquing or attacking or seeing them as good or bad.
And I think one of the things I really do like doing is keeping all the diverse members within the group talking to each other, because they get very cross with each other and will easily stomp off in a fury and say, well, that's the end of that. So then I have to go back and say, so what's going on here?
You return to it. It's such a loss of our political system that happened. And I sense that a lot of people who do become more public profiles do get exposed to that nastiness, that nasty human side that I'm sure we all have, but some people are very much more explicit and vocal.
And I see it as a weakness as well, in the sense that I will not expose myself to that kind of risk because of knowing that we'll not be able to sleep, I won't be able to function properly. I don't have that steeliness that I have seen other leaders have. So there's a limit to what you can do.
Are you able to sit with that in a particular way that doesn't then, you don't attack yourself for having that weakness?
Look, probably I'm a bit critical. I wish that I were a bit different, but I don't beat myself over it. What I am able to do is say, well, I can get up in front of a hall of 600 people and manage that group, and I can have 3 politicians sitting on the stage and I can say, why aren't you 3 talking to each other? Give us a life. Is there anyone in this room who I can do that,
Yeah, so you don't kind of stay focused on what you can't do. You shift your focus on what you can do and what your skill set is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've got a different set of skills.
Any other challenges? I'm sure there's many and we could sit here for hours, but what comes to mind as probably the main challenges?
Well, one of my big challenges is trying to work out, first of all, who to trust. There's an awful lot of people in this movement who have strong views and would like you to be doing this, that and the other. And I get a lot of people who would like to use Light of Footprints in various ways and for various purposes. And I have to keep thinking, what's right here, and how do I weigh that up? Because in a way it's sort of in my hands. And the other thing, of course, is the role that I play with being seen as the voice of Light of Footprints politically. So I do talk to politicians, and in some cases I do it privately on both email and text, and the extent to which that is private and the extent to which that is something I need to share. Often ask, so tell me, what do you think? And I will have to weigh up how I speak and what I say based on what is public and what is private. And of course then I have to talk to my own troops who feel that I'm morally obliged because I'm only in that position because of them, because of being the leader of that
are like
troop.
a politician, really. You've got your own political party here, Light of Footprints.
Well, that's right. It's a body of some power in a local electorate. It's got influence.
And so kind of separating out your own individual thoughts and feelings, then that has to be kind of cross-checked with the Light of Footprints voice.
It's more not my own individual thoughts and feelings. It's much more about building a personal relationship based on the fact that I'm not just me, I'm the convener of this group. And yet I am me.
I was just going to say, are you ever just you?
I'm always confused by that distinction in this particular role. I always have been me in all the other roles that I've played, but in this case, it's an honorary job. It is quite fearful to think that you might misuse it in some way. Well, misuse it in the sense that you can speak on behalf of Light of Footprints when you don't have that authority, or that you have access to information that belongs rightfully with all those people, but you've been given it in confidence or you've been given it in a way that makes you feel like that was for me, that a trusted statement.
It sounds like you've got a very strong ethical and moral code. I think it's in, and a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness. I feel like Light of Footprints is in very, very safe hands. But are you allowed to make mistakes?
Well, I hope so, because I often do. I mean,
phew,
I do. I've just bungled along, and in the course of a meeting, I'll say, well, I got that one wrong.
Great. Oh, and the ability to own up. And you're smiling and laughing now. I know the listeners can't see your face, but there is a lot of playfulness and you said before, laughter and just the capacity to see things, I know, pardon the pun, but in a lighter way. And it's not in a dismissing way at all. It's more in just a very human way.
If I didn't get rewards in terms of the pleasure that comes from working with a group of people you really enjoy and laugh with and admire and respect. If I didn't get that, I wouldn't do it for to save the world sort of thing. I haven't got a really strong, again, I know that activists will die in a ditch for it because that is so important that, we've got one earth and we have to do it this way and I will attach myself to a bulldozer here. And that I have huge respect for and admire it in them. I don't have it. I haven't strapped myself to a bulldozer.
Well, and you don't have to have it. I think that's representing the diversity.
That might be true. I do see it as a weakness, as not having the strength to do that. At the same time, the fact that I don't means that I have a different kind of skill and I can do other things that perhaps the activists can't.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing such a journey of your life. We could go on for hours.
We might
need to crack open a bottle of wine and some cheese and bickies or something. It's been an absolute delight to have this conversation with you, Carolyn. I just really appreciate your honesty and the time that you've spent with me today.
Well, I've loved it. I feel very privileged that you asked me.
Oh, thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
All right. So take care.
Do we end? I think we just end by saying we will be in touch. We are part of the crew that makes Lighter Footprints work.
All right, so we're back in the studio with me and Bronwyn, also known as Bronwyn's Car today. And so, Bronwyn, the original intent with Feeling the Change, what the podcast was going to be when you did this, was that you would be talking to people about their experiences and how they took care of themselves and how they related to the massive topic that is climate change. And then at the end of an interview, you'd actually draw out a couple psychological lessons or psychological features of that talk. So you've done that for the Caroline interview. So can we hear a little bit about what you thought about the interview?
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much gold in that interview around how Carolyn has figured out ways to look after herself. But I guess a theme that really stood out to me was how she was moving towards accepting her own activist style. How there were these moments of critiquing herself as somehow doing something wrong or not being worthy because she didn't want to, chain herself to bulldozers or engage in that direct action. But then moving towards, that healthy perspective of acknowledging one's own limits and boundaries and preferences and honouring that she still had something meaningful to contribute, that she could activate her own skill set and that was good enough, that we don't all have to be the same. And I think that her capacity to be aware of her own inner critic and then shift her focus to what she can do is such a valuable psychological skill. Something that I strive to, try to embody myself.
So I understand, Bronwyn, that, this interview was done for what was going to be your earlier show. Thank you so much for bringing it to Climactic. And we really hope that, down the track, maybe not in the too distant future, that Feeling the Change can be a thing out there in the world as well. But because you've done this recording long before meeting up with us and hearing about Climactic, I understand you've got some people involved that helped you get this to this stage already that you want to thank.
Yeah, I'd really firstly love to thank Carolyn for her warmth and openness. I'd also love to thank Carolyn's son. Thank you so much for lending us your studio and recording equipment. And thanks to Brad Armstrong, who encouraged me and supported in developing, the first edit of this episode.
That's lovely, Bronwyn. Thank you so much for bringing this to us today, and we're so happy to have you with us in Climactic. You've been listening to a production of the Climactic Collective, a group of storytellers dedicated to bringing you stories from the climate change community. We love working with individuals and groups in their local community doing great work on climate change and sustainability. And if you'd like us to work with you to produce a story, just get in touch at hello@climactic.fm or on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Climactic Show. The Climactic Collective is Mark Spencer, Rich Bowden, Maxine Baisley, Georgia Scheel, and Bronwyn Gresham. Our producer is Hazel Fidicaro. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this show, please spread the word. Independent shows like ours really need word of mouth from our listeners in order to grow. And if you had the time to leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks and have a great day, and we'll be back next week.
The Climactic Collective.